各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。經濟合作發展組織 OECD 每3年舉行一次嘅國際學生能力評估 PISA， 最新嘅一份評估數據就顯示本國嘅學生喺過去20年嘅整體成績一路下滑。本國只有12%嘅學生達到較高嘅成績，相比起其他國家以及地區嘅學生有一段距離㗎。喺數學科嘅成績方面本國嘅學生2022年嘅成績比起2018年下降咗15點㗎，等同於本國學生比起平均水平係落後咗3/4個學年，成績不斷咁倒退，令人擔心。卑詩省內嘅學生數學水平都有下降嘅情況，成績點解會不進反退呢？
It is a worry for everybody, but it's also because students no longer see the benefit of education. Right? We're shifting away from that with the AI and everything that's coming along. They're like, I have my calculator, I have my computer, I have my phone. Why do I need to learn these? And then the answer, why am I learning these math?
雖然好多人認同求學不是求分數，讀書唔應該只係靠成績分辨好與壞，但係本國學生喺國際能力評估嘅表現強差人意，連續錄得20年跌幅。教育到底發生啲咩嘢事呢？係咩令到學生表現不進反退呢？
It's important to notice that the performance has been dropping for many years. It didn't start with COVID. A lot of people are trying to blame COVID, that everything started during the COVID time. It's not true. It started before, but COVID accelerated it. It made it faster. It made it even clearer what's going on.
最近有唔少報道都開始討論本國教育制度係咪令本國學生喺國際舞台上嘅競爭力比其他國家或者地區疲弱，檢討教育制度又係咪刻不容緩呢？今年喺卑詩省列治文市就讀12年班嘅中學生 Fairchild， 下個學年即將會踏入人生嘅新一頁，就係成為大專學生。一向喺數學成績方面較為理想嘅佢話，每日放學都會溫習數學題目。
I took pre-calculus 12 last semester, and this year I'm doing AP calculus. So to revise math, I usually use YouTube videos, and also I kind of go on conference calls with my friends before exams to revise together, so that I think together we understand the questions more and we answer them. We also check each other's answers, and that helps us revise.
So study with each other is very effective to yourself?
I think so, because I feel like when I'm studying with others, I'm also motivated to not be distracted, because we talk about math and we talk about our studies instead of being on our phone or talking to other people. So that way I get motivation to study, and also because I'm with other people, they can kind of correct me when I'm doing something wrong.
Fairchild 話：雖然自己嘅成績比較理想，不過就唔係每個同學都對數學充滿理解。喺課堂期間，老師都要用唔同嘅方式去教授。
There's a number of different ways my math sir he teaches us. So the one thing he does is he usually goes through notes with us during the lesson. And in those notes, there's also questions that he lets us do on our own. And then after that, he does the questions so the whole class, so the people who didn't understand can also learn. And also, at the end of class, he gives us a homework sheet, which is due the next class. So every class we get homework questions, and then we kind of discuss them during the next class. So all our doubts are also answered.
When you encounter some difficulties in math, especially in math, how do teachers teach you in order to solve all the equations?
In math, when I encounter difficulties, I kind of like to ask my peers first and see if they can help me before I go to ask the sir. And usually they can give me the answer and they can help and guide me to get the answer correctly. But if not, I also have YouTube videos as a backup, kind of to revise at home, and if I can't access the teacher or other students, get answers to my questions.
Fairchild 今個學期率先修讀大學先修課程微積分。佢話修讀原因係為咗之後喺大專院校唔使再修讀呢一科，而且佢認為呢一科對佢心儀嘅大學科目息息相關。
So in AP calculus, we're doing different chapters, right? So we kind of finished the chapter on derivatives, and I feel that part in the beginning it was easy, but it kind of got harder as we progressed into like the chapter, and there's quite a few people who found like a few quizzes difficult. So we kind of went over the answers of the quizzes together after the quiz, and also when the sir discussed the quiz answers, we kind of like understood through that, like the discussions. There are like certain parts that I do find difficult. Sometimes questions like I don't really know the answers to them. And if like YouTube videos can't help me, I would probably go back to the teacher like on the next day, like the next class, and he would probably guide me through the answer and do it step by step. I want to go into like business, as I said, or like economics, and I feel like that subject uses a lot of math, and because of that, I think math would be helpful to me in the future. From like my secondary school knowledge, I think like for example, taking AP Calculus right now, if I do get a good mark in my AP Calculus exam at the end of like May, then I don't have to take Math 100, so I don't have to take a course, which will kind of also further my education and make it faster in post-secondary. And that ways it would help me.
每個學生都希望自己有好成績，但數據反映咗本國學生近20年，無論喺數學、閱讀同埋科學領域方面嘅表現都錄得下滑嘅情況，成績亦都低於新加坡、香港同埋日本等地。菲沙研究所近幾年亦都喺呢一方面着手研究同埋探討本國教育制度係咪出現漏洞。
I think we need to look at, why are student outcomes declining? Why are they declining beginning in 2003 and then worsening as a result of school closures? And why have maybe school closures had a greater impact on Canada than on other countries like, say, Singapore? And the question we need to ask is, what state were Canadian students in going into COVID-19 school closures versus, say, students in Singapore? So in Canada in recent decades, I think there are a number of factors going on. There's changes to curriculum. We've moved away from teaching the science of reading and math. So we have less sort of rote memorization, direct instruction in math. We have a lot less of an emphasis on phonics in reading. These are evidence-rooted methods of teaching children how to learn to read and how to learn how to do math that we've moved away from in favor of that more inquiry-based approach in our curriculum that we see in BC and other places across Canada now. And so I think that is part of it, or at least we should explore, is this not working for our children because they don't seem to be grasping math and reading and all these basic skills. Our system also now passes students right through every grade, really despite how they're doing. So if they're not grasping the context, those foundational building blocks.
McPherson 指出，本國教育體系方針同埋理念同其他國家同埋地區相比，特別係東南亞地區有好大嘅差異。
Another factor is that, report cards that parents are receiving have become less clear. They have less of a clear idea of how their children are doing. That makes it more difficult for them to help their children. Our system of standardized testing in most provinces has declined across the country, and that's not every province, but certainly in BC, the state of standardized testing has declined, which gives all stakeholders, schools, teachers, parents, students, a less clear idea objectively of how they're doing. So it makes it more difficult to help them improve. And if you're comparing Canada to a country like Singapore, for example, Singapore has a clear structure of teacher-directed instruction. Teachers are leaders in their classroom. If there's behavioral issues, that's something that teachers have the opportunity to create accountability for those students that, really we've moved away from in Canada. There's more of the focus on the science of learning in terms of their curricular methods. There's more of a focus on academic excellence. There's a lot more testing throughout the school system, testing with consequences for students, so it's more meaningful to students to actually study and show their competence on those tests. These are big differences between Canada's system and Singapore's system. It's definitely worth exploring, why are Canadian students not performing as well as their peers in other countries that are sticking with those more evidence-rooted methods as opposed to the more progressive inquiry-led methods that we've moved toward in Canada.
教育方針政策近10幾年出現變化，學生同埋家長都適應當中。作為老師亦都唔例外。任教超過20年數學科老師 Cohila Silvers 喺幾年前開始一個補習平台，除咗教授嚟自唔同水平嘅學生，亦都要培育新一代嘅教師。佢話隨住時代嘅變遷，教學嘅授課模式亦都出現咗唔少挑戰。
When when we were learning math, and then as I started teaching math, we were looking for one answer, or there was you had an answer at the end of every question, and that's how you learned. But eventually what we did is Common Core math in the US and Math Makes Sense in Canada. What they did is that they started exploring math. So it's good to explore math because you don't want to memorize, right? Just facts. But the problem is they never connected exploration then to getting the right answer. They left it just in exploration phase. So some students get lost in the process of exploring math. You need to bring it back to the right answer because at the end of the day, what does the child get marked on? The right answer, because math always has a right answer and a wrong answer. So I think the exploration, for example, here's how we taught learning times table. We would take beats, we would take objects, and we would start grouping them and counting them because we want the kids to learn how grouping is done, right? But the problem is eventually the child has to know 9 times 9 is 81. You can't sit there creating 9 groups of 9 beats to get the 81. There's no time. So the speed has to come too, right? I think taking from exploration to getting a child to speed up and then right away telling 9 times 9 is 81, we kind of miss that, teaching them that. So a lot of students don't even know their times table now. They have to go to their calculator. So that's a big shift, right? That's what happened.
Kohila 特別提到，本國學生之所以成績每況愈下，係由於佢哋缺乏從根本學起，亦都唔知道從邊一度思考數學題目。
So over the years, I was a math teacher, then I was a math tutor for many, many years. So I've worked directly one-on-one with over 1,600 plus students. But during that time, I discovered that most of the students are struggling in math, not because they're struggling in math, they don't know how to learn to learn. They don't know how their brain works. They don't know how to apply any of the skills. They don't have the discipline to learn. So we're pushing content onto students who are not ready to receive the content. So I've over the years changed. 11 years ago, I shifted my format of how I address my students. I don't start with math anymore. If a student comes to me, we don't begin with math. We begin by looking at the child as who they are. Because I want to know how their brain works. Because every child's brain works differently. It's wired differently. So my process now involves coaching them to getting them in alignment to learn.
BC 省內有學生形容學習雖然有挑戰啊，不過經過唔少嘅鍛鍊呢，都能夠將問題解決。而政界以及教學界就擔心省內嘅學術競爭力同埋地位將會受到影響嘅同時啊，亦都係提出唔少建議去改善學術地位，其中就係包括進行教育改革。但係點樣改革呢？我哋下一節翻嚟再睇。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。唔係2003年啊 ，BC 省係進行過一次嘅教育改革㗎。不過自此之後，每3年進行嘅 PISA 評估就反映到學生嘅能力不斷下滑。唔單止係 BC 省啊，全國嘅水平亦都逐漸下降。咁究竟啊，係學生嘅水平不足，定係教育政策有漏洞需要修訂呢？
數學老師 Kohila Silvers 認為 PISA 評估顯示本國學生數學能力不足，呢一個問題係由於數學課程編排出現漏洞，再加上前幾年嘅新冠疫情，令教育工作者無所適從。
Yes, absolutely. It's a challenge because students are coming into their classroom without mastering the previous grades. So if you're teaching grade 10, for example, in BC, if the student is not ready to receive grade 10 concepts, you don't have the time as a teacher to go back and teach them grade 9, grade 8, grade 7. You don't have time because you have a curriculum to deliver and you have to teach them all of that in that time frame. So there's not enough time for the teachers to go back. And then we have 22 to 26, sometimes 30 kids in the classroom. If every child is missing different concepts, the teacher can't go back and teach individually too, right? We teach to the middle. So teachers have a lot on their plate to deal with this. And plus, of course, we had a shutdown, right, COVID. During that, the students' education was interrupted and they learned some behaviors at home. Now we're trying to retrain them back into the classroom. That's also been a cause of why students are struggling too and teachers are struggling.
Cohiller 又話唔少學生對數學失去興趣，揾唔到對學習探討嘅意義。
It is a worry for everybody, but it's also because students no longer see the benefit of education, right? We're shifting away from that with the AI and everything that's coming along. They're like, I have my calculator, I have my computer, I have my phone, why do I need to learn these? And then the answer, why am I learning these math? When a student asks, why am I learning it? A lot of our teachers don't know why they're teaching it. If you cannot answer a child's question, a student's question, that's very smart question, and then they lose the interest in learning that subject. So math has been one of those subjects. Why am I learning? I'm not going to become an engineer. I'm not going to become a doctor. Why are you forcing me to learn this? Because I don't see where I'm going to use it. So we're not showing the relevant to why they should spend the time learning it. Until we bring that into the curriculum, they see a point and the application of math, then they would want to learn and they will have the interest to learn, right?
家長一般都會希望子女嘅學業優異，所以近幾年唔少家長為子女提供額外課外活動，增值自己，希望子女喺各個範疇都能夠突出表現。但疫情期間，唔少課外活動都被迫擱置。卑斯大學教育學院教授 Marina Miller-Bolton 話：呢一樣亦都係加深咗本國，尤其係卑斯省學生成績下降嘅程度。
In the United States for years, they've been doing research where they looked at the kids from the low socioeconomic status families, poorer families, and richer families. And the biggest difference is the increase in difference happens during the summer. And you can say why? Because during the summer there is no school. The kids whose parents have money, they send the kids to science camp, math activities, these activities, go to museums. Now imagine if you have a child who does not have this financial support from the family. So the whole summer goes out, and what happens, the kids then, in the summer, they go 1 year back. So the kids whose parents invested into them in the summer, they go forward. But the kids whose families don't have those resources go 1 year back. And I think the biggest issue is that this COVID was even more than the summer. And the gaps grew tremendously. So the kids whose families couldn't invest into the kids during this time, they went down even more. And because in Canada we have a lot of families who support the kids' education.
有啲咩解決方案能夠俾本國學生成績有所改善，去提高競爭力呢？卑斯聯合黨喺今年1月提出建議，禁止喺 K12教室使用手機，確保師生喺一個積極健康課堂嘅環境學習。不過呢一個建議，Bolton教授就認為唔可行。
I completely disagree. I just wrote a paper about it to ban mobile. That is, again, not only not research-based, but it is also unproductive. So let me give you an example. You mean to ban the phone, yeah? For example, I teach my teachers, my teacher candidates, future physics teachers, to use applications, excuse me just a moment, that you can do science with your phone. For example, every phone that we have today is more powerful than computers were 10 years ago, yeah? So a lot of phones allow you to do science. For that, you have to teach the teachers how to do it. All the world is asking, how can we engage students?
不過，卑斯聯合黨黨領馮宜幹 Kevin Falcon 就話，相信學校有適當指引，而教育工作者普遍都支持相關建議。
The vast majority of teachers support the removal of cell phones from the classrooms because they see the results firsthand. They can see the distracted kids, the kids not paying attention. In the very rare circumstances where a teacher might want to use a cell phone as part of a classroom lesson, that's no problem. The kids can go to their cell phone lockers, they can get their cell phone and bring it into that classroom, they can use it during that class. And then at the end of the class, they can put them back. But the point is that the less cell phone usage during classroom time, the better the children's performance is. That is very clear. And that's why I support the removal of cell phones from the classroom.
馮宜幹又引用一啲嘅國際組織數據顯示，限制課室使用手機令學生成績會有所改善。
In fact, UNESCO, which is an international body, did a very deep investigation into the impact of cell phone use in classrooms. And what they found was it had a measurably negative performance on students' ability to learn and retain information. And if you think about it, it's just logical. Children are children. And if they're spending their time on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram when they should be listening to the teacher, then that is taking away the importance of focus and paying attention and learning, absorbing information. So I am very strongly supporting the ban on cell phone use during classroom time. They can still bring their cell phones to school, but we lock them in a cell phone locker, and the kids go to class and they pay attention to the teacher and they learn. And then at lunchtime and at the end of the school, they can get their phone and they can look at it, put it back, and go into the classroom. The evidence is overwhelming. It's pouring in from all over. The United States, Europe, France, and China, for example, limit the use of cell phones in classrooms for good reason, because they want their kids to learn. And we have to follow that leadership example and do the same thing.
卑詩省喺2003年進行過一次教育改革之後，教育模式亦都開始作出改變。以前教育着重學生從根本學起，由淺學到深，但改革咗之後，卑詩省以至本國喺教育上主張啟發學生思維。究竟兩者之間應該實行邊一個方式較為實際呢？
Critical thinking is very important, to ask questions when you don't understand, when something doesn't make sense, because that's how you can exist in this world. So critical thinking is important, but it's not just thought through math. It's through everything we do, right? Even reading, writing, everything has critical thinking. So exploration is great, but then how are we measured in the real world? Right? I can't keep exploring stuff. I have to have answers in the real world. If you ask me something today, I need to come up with answers. I can't just say I'm going to start exploring and I'll come back to you 2 days later. It doesn't work like that. So bringing it all together, that's why in math makes sense. We did a lot of exploration, which is amazing because you don't want to memorize things, right? Which is awesome. But we need to bring it back and be able to answer fast, quicker, right? Those are speed, because the world doesn't wait for you. Everything happens on a clock. Everybody wants instant answers. So you can't just wait and say, I'm going to explore and come back to you. If we can build a world like that, we can keep exploring. But we need to merge these two ideas together. And then if we could have a place where we explore, but then we also build on speed and accuracy and confidence, then critical thinking all comes together too, right? It's a confidence.
另外，有評論指出，卑詩省已經取消咗12年級省內公開考試，咁樣令省內學生喺國際競爭力不足。對於呢一方面，政府係咪需要再一次進行教育改革呢？
We have competitiveness, but you compete based on what? Of course the kids compete. Everybody wants to get, for example, to UBC, yeah? And we say you need to have a GPA of 96% or 95%. So they compete based on how much the grade the teacher will give me, but because there is no one ruler for everybody and the teachers are different, the grades cannot be compared. So imagine that you have 30 and I have 35. You use inches, I use centimeters. If we don't use the same unit, I cannot compare the numbers. The numbers mean nothing. Of course the students compete, but instead of competing in the knowledge, we're telling them, write a better essay or do something else instead of asking, do you have the skills in mathematics and science that we want you to have to be able to study engineering, to be able to study medicine? And we all know what those skills are, and we know how to test them. But we do not want to work hard to make the kids achieve those skills.
I actually believe that the foundational skills assessment tests are important. And I think they have to be meaningful, which means they have to count towards the children's marks. Because, look, we have to recognize that when kids move on from high school, many will go to college or universities or even trade schools where they're going to be facing tests. And they might as well get used to writing a test and knowing that it's important to study and do your homework and prepare, because that's what they will find in life. And so I do think it's important that these tests matter, that we support the testing, and that we encourage a system that measures how our kids are doing, and we respond and give teachers the resources they need to ensure that our kids can perform at the highest possible level. So yes, I'm very supportive of that.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間又差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。咁如果觀眾想上網重溫翻今集節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得翻㗎啦。下星期同樣時間再同大家見面，晚安。